Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we're going to be looking at the overnights for Doctor Who. Now this week was an interesting one because of course it was very much contingent on whether Doctor Who was able to air between the FA Cup final and Eurovision. Obviously if the FA Cup overran, then Doctor Who would be bumped from the schedule. However, luckily that didn't happen. Crystal Palace won the FA Cup final handily, so Doctor Who got to air at its normal time. And so with that, Doctor Who received a pretty major boost to its viewing figures of almost 1 million in terms of overnights when compared to the previous week, The Story in the Engine. Now, I've already seen some people say that, oh, I bet Tharies is going to report on this as like the show being saved and this being an astronomical figure for Doctor Who that only achieved on its own. And like, no, of course not. It's obvious that the big reason why this got a boost is because it was wedged in a very, very good slot. But nonetheless, I am glad that they did that. In the end, it was a gamble they took, and it was a gamble that paid off. We're going to be going into the figures in detail, but subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 30,000 subscribers, and we just reached 27,000. Thank you all so much. We've got less than 3,000 to go till 30,000. Can we make it by the end of the series? We've got 2 weeks to go. We'll see what happens. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to be doing regular content, so hopefully you guys enjoy it. But let's dive right in. So first of all, Ratings UK, overnight ratings, Doctor Who, the very lucky placement, saw the show soar to 2.57 million viewers. The Interstellar Song Contest has become the most watched of the series, sitting over 500,000 above the previous high, which was around 2 million for the Robot Revolution, which makes sense because it's the opener. With FA Cup final and Eurovision ahead, it was third of the day. And yeah, so it got 2.57 million viewers in its slot. For context, I did see someone ask what the FA Cup final got, and it was averaging around 3.5 million, just to kind of give you a basis for that. So yeah, obviously up about 500,000 from the previous high and 1 million from the previous week. We'll go more into the TV Zone coverage of it. Doctor Who continued on Saturday, May 17th, with the Interstellar Song Contest, which scored overnight audience of 2.6 million, or 2.57, they rounded it up, which will include iPlayer devices and catch-up, which will be released 26th of May. So again, another important factor to note here is that specifically with this episode, it was pre-warned by hardcore fans that there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this one, so try and watch it ahead of time. So I wouldn't be surprised if the iPlayer figure is slightly bigger for this episode than it was for previous. Obviously with the return of the Rani and Susan, that's going to lead to a lot of sort of die-hard fans watching it earlier in the day, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Overall, it was the third most watched title of the day, behind the BBC's coverage of the FA Cup and Eurovision, of course. Doctor Who was double its direct ITV competition and had way more viewers than anything on ITV during prime time. So that's another interesting point I want to note here. This is the first week Doctor Who has aired where Britain's Got Talent hasn't been on. Britain's Got Talent has now finished, and it makes me think, even though obviously I don't suspect that this viewership spike will sustain to next week, it does make me wonder if Wishworld could get a slightly higher figure owing to the fact that it's not going to be up against Britain's Got Talent next week. That'll be interesting to see. And obviously coming off the back of a slightly raised viewership this week might help it as well. It'll just be interesting. I think the interesting thing about this is less so the figure being higher itself, because we all kind of knew that would be the case. That's why they scheduled Doctor Who there. But more so, will it trickle down to the rest of the series? Obviously, we know that the finale airs at a normal time as well, so it'll be interesting to see if that makes any kind of difference as well. And yeah, obviously you can see here, episode 1, 2 million overnight, and then obviously it trickles down slowly from there, with episode 3 having a bounce, and then obviously episode 6, which is for some reason on this website way down below here, receiving the highest overnight of the series at around 2.57 million, which I believe is around the same as what last series' openers got, Space Babies and Devil's Cord, and I think 73 yards as well. So we could see, kind of a consolidated figure of around 4 million for this, which would be good. And again, obviously people will say, oh, well, that doesn't sound very high, but again, you got to mention, it's double anything ITV had and the third most watched thing on Saturday. So chances are it probably will chart a fair bit higher when it comes to the consolidated figures this week as opposed to last. I'll just be interested to see if this not only affects the kind of next couple of weeks, but also whether it will affect people going back and watching this on catch-up, people might have seen this episode and gone, oh, you know, Graham Norton's in it, oh, Ryland's in it, this is fun, maybe I'll go back and watch the previous couple of weeks, you know, and that'll affect the 28-day consolidated. It may not, but it's an interesting thought. But no, I'm not going to for a second claim that this is obviously not due to it being sandwiched between the FA Cup and Eurovision. We all knew that. But it is good that it worked out for Doctor Who in the end. And I mean, it's not a bad thing for a show to have advantageous, like, release time. If anything, it's nice to see Doctor Who get given this primetime slot after I've kind of felt like it was thrown to the dogs by having to compete directly with Britain's Got Talent every week for the last couple of weeks. It's just not a battle you're ever going to win, especially when the episode goes out 12 hours before for most of its dedicated audience. And to those of you who will just say that the reason the number is higher is because it was just left on during the end of the FA Cup, it's the average for the whole slot, not the peak viewing, so we obviously don't know what the peak is. Probably more, obviously, people going in from the FA Cup and going in to Eurovision, but 22.6 was the average for the slot, or 2.57 was the average overall figure for Doctor Who overnight. Obviously, the peak would be more than that. Just double checking, and yeah, the first episode of Doctor Who Season 1 was around 2.6, and episode 4 was around 2.62. So this is the highest overnight figure since 73 yards, outside of, I guess, specials as well. If you don't include Christmas specials, it's the highest since 73 yards, which is very interesting. And obviously, as I said, that appreciated to around 4 million, so we could probably assume a similar figure for this episode as well, which would be good. To be honest, though, after Nicola Metvin has said, like, Doctor Who will continue, who I trust greatly. Obviously, I've said before, she's gotten so many things right. Like, I could put screenshots on the screen. She's got an incredibly good track record. I'm not really particularly worried about the viewing figures as they currently stand, because the show's going to continue either way at this point. So, yeah. But I am glad to see a boost for this episode. And I just hope that that continues into next week, you know. Especially with the cliffhanger of the Rani and stuff, maybe it'll make people want to check out what's going on there, but who knows. Also, obviously important to note that this doesn't include, like, Disney Plus or any international viewing as well, which is really what we're waiting on in terms of, like, the show's future. Obviously, we know that it'll probably continue regardless, but just whether or not it's continuing with Disney specifically is more contingent on the international viewership, which is not made public, unfortunately. So this is only really, like, the UK, so again, you know, it's not really a complete picture of Doctor Who's overall, you know, success, really. But yeah, I just thought I'd make that point because, you know, I want to make it doubly clear when I'm covering these figures that it doesn't include anything with the Disney Plus stuff. This is just the people who watched it live on BBC on Saturday night in the UK. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a like. Subscribe if you're new. I'll probably be doing another video talking about all the other aspects of this episode soon, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you later.